Greetings. It is 1:47 p.m. on April 1st, 2021 in Houston. In Dallas, Texas. And apparently, are you in Houston? So, are you observing me from Houston? Hi, Houston. Hi. Yeah. Okay. Hi, anybody else that's actually observing me real time. So, you know that I just got onto my blog where on April 30th of last year, I said I was seizing facilities here in the state of Texas connected to the gas and oil refining, and I put some public notices on there, including one that had a 90-day timeline during which certain things had to be accomplished, and I have been operating in accordance with my understanding of what would have been reasonable responses relative to what was actually going on real time in so far as things were going on as they were in the actual vicinity, and that the actual reflecting of the public record was giving us information that wasn't being acted on in a responsible way by alleged members of various leadership paradigms, right? Including ones that were engaged in actively fraudulent and illegal activity. And so now we're in a situation where I've done an analysis of my inventories. I've put into evidence what needs to be put into evidence specifically as evidence, and then prepared a process whereby certain things that are currently evidence can be engaged in a manner that will then allow for them to be recharacterized through an appropriate legal process that is precluded by some of the other factors that have already been identified as potential pitfalls and areas wherein they can be continued to be laundered as part of the illegal activity that's already ongoing. And one of the things that has been revealed is that on the day I made that announcement, actually shortly after there, I began to formally enter items into my reserve. And I had a very specific foundation for what I understood to be a reserve. This based upon very basic research I had done on the use of commodities as a form of collateral and stockpiling of commodities, including as a form of emergency reserve, and the role specifically agricultural products can play. But then also the understanding of preparing the reserve and the collateral of the reserve in connection with an emergency preparedness paradigm. Starting with a concept of an individual to-go kit, for instance, and or understanding inventories connected to various things regarding consumption and anticipated over a particular timeline for a particular group of people, depending upon what the resources would be, including the means by which to cook it or what should be prepared, and then considerations of nutritional needs, as well as dietary needs for people that might have special dietary needs. And so I've been doing this consistently and formally and officially and verifiably for the last year. And the very first official deposit and indicator of a formal process of inputting into the reserve happened to be on April 30th of 2020. Now, this tells me some very important things. We're in a situation where, if I'm correct, the financial processes already exist, and this is already part of an established paradigm that is legal, and if done transparently and consistently and openly and with appropriate accounting, as well as appropriate noting, as I call it, doesn't have to allow itself to elevate itself into any sort of risk paradigms that are untenable for those that might have need of resources and would be the most vulnerable to exploitation. I have compiled a potential budget based on what could be identified as the value of what I have been provided from the community as collateral. Please understand the actual food products have already been made into what I did not actually consume were already frozen as part of what would have been a frozen reserve. I've already attended to the frozen reserve earlier in the year and discussed the terms of that. And that paradigm was not met with an appropriate, shall we say, respectability. And so I have to regroup that. But in the process of regrouping that, based upon what would be called dry storage or dry goods, and or the actual value at the time that it was invested that it does, and as the means by which certain items have actually literally been entered into an inventory for the emergency preparedness situation, which is also a part of the reserve. And by the way, based on what could have began as of October of 2019, if it had not been permitted instead to allow for my business plan and my life to be stolen to be used for somebody else's food program. The food was a part of a strategic reserve policy. And somebody else decided to fraudulently mischaracterize my life and allow for things that were supposed to be involved in another kind of paradigm, which I'm going to describe separately in another video, to be used for somebody else's intent. And I have been remanded to fulfilling benchmarks in their scheme, despite the fact I had to leave town and travel to no less than 3 cities since then. Right? So today that ends. Period. I don't care how many DOD contracts ended up getting set up as part of so-called COVID-19 relief. Believe me, I've been tracking it. Instead, we're going to deal with this the level it's at. Now, I have prepared a budget that reveals a variety of matters, and this is going to be addressed. But what it also leaves open is a possibility that beginning on April 5th, we can begin a process of allowing for an extension of credit over the course of 1 month that can begin to be met in the month of May. Almost a 30-day extension of credit with various benchmarks that start on May 5th. And then approximately every week after that, there's a new benchmark that's set in that. In terms of the actual proportion, in terms of how these metrics can translate into the actual specific amount of credit that would be able to be available week to week. This is something that can be negotiated. I'm going to take that into consideration this evening and afternoon. But we're on April 1st right now. And I believe that not only is there, with what was put on the elements of the budget that were already entered into before the beginning of April, which means the credit that had already accumulated and had already been made available, I believe it could be understood as a form of, shall we say, upfront what is available now. And then we can begin the process of allowing for extension of a credit that can be correlated with benchmarks that can start to be achieved in the month of May. They're very modest. We're not talking about anything very extravagant. And please understand, we are also operating under an understanding that this is an emergency situation and that we are under the authority of the citizen militia in the state of Texas that has already been activated as of the past weekend. So this is all completely doable. It's all completely legal within the state of Texas, and it's all absolutely necessary. Now, in the next couple of days, as I've said, we've got to do certain things by the end of the day today. They're very manageable and very, very doable. If there is a situation where we are, shall we say, having a problem with the specific transportation and the identification and the understanding of the transportation matters at hand, which is the thing that just last week somebody else decided they were going to dispossess me of for absolutely no legitimate reason and under completely unacceptable pretenses. But you need to understand that we've already discussed this. We're at a 1/4. You understand? We're working at 25% of what was already used in the speculation that was going on concurrent to the theft of my transportation. And if we allow for that recalibration, then we can regroup and we can take care of that with an understanding that that is going to be appropriately considered within the context of the rest of this particular kind of budgetary paradigm that's going to be meted out. Now, I understood that based upon what had happened on Monday, with a consideration of a recapitulation of timelines, i.e. somebody else tried to put me on their schedule and it wasn't appropriate to do that. And because they had set up things that were inappropriate, there were consequences and there were ramifications. And I'm dealing with that the way I can. But insofar as there was another timeline that I've been keeping consistently, then these things meet up now. And if they are executed now, we're going to be able to definitely implement a particular kind of safety measure while we also prepare for the next stages. Now, you need to understand, I understand that we are in one of a number of phases of a protracted campaign of warfare that has not been overtly declared. I'm acknowledging overtly as such. But it is also important that we fortify and protect ourselves to the best we can, and that we have in mind an understanding of what it is that we are fighting to preserve, and that we are also working toward in whatever the intents are that we establish in the course of responding as necessary. I've already laid out what I understand to be a long term vision that hopefully could have been and will be accomplished once there is normalcy and once there is a de escalation. But despite that, and despite all the possibilities attendant with that, as I said, I understand we are in one of the number of stages of an active warfare engagement. And without an overt declaration by those alleging that they are operating under the authority of some kind of state actordom, then we have to take measures into our own hands. This is what I have to offer. It can be done. It can be done very effectively. I will start tomorrow. Tomorrow I have other things I need to attend to as well. And starting tomorrow, I will do what I can to make this as public and official as possible. But my understanding is that we got some things that have already been created. There are some things we already have to work with that have not been, shall we say, invested. Because they have not been invested yet, they are available to take care of the emergency matter at hand right now. And then in the course of using that to, for instance, get what we need right now, we can start working in the next month with an understanding that if we maintain modest expenses and we keep track of it very diligently, then when we reconcile at the end of the month, we can start matching up what we have already committed to as an obligation incurred this month by using it in correlation with other things that we're going to undertake to meet the benchmarks next month. And if we follow that and compare it with what was already set up last year, that will assist in providing the kind of long-term security we need as we go through an appropriate process of redress, including a process of redress in a reformation of the government functions necessary for successful actions and for a successful social reconciliation. Okay, so on one hand, we're in a very significant situation, but there's no real reason to panic. We have what we need to do what we need to do. But what we also need is we need for people that have refused thus far to relinquish the illusion that they are competent, qualified, or even interested in demonstrating actual leadership at this time on accord with what we need, to make formal declarations and allow for a capable leadership to step up without this conspiracy and contrivance of sabotage. Whatever was supposed to be the benefit of this protracted engagement in acts of sabotage has not yielded results enough for you to justify its perpetuation. And what you're calling down is something that is going to have very significant long-term consequences on who or whatever it was you were appealing to in an effort to try to justify your positioning. Please take this under consideration very significantly. And one of the things that has been revealed with what happened with the winter storm actually is going to be able to be acknowledged. And what it has to acknowledge is that these long-standing efforts to submerge actual, literal, real-time concerns, including these showmanship that ends up going on where there's these exhibitions that attempt to deflect attention away from long-standing grievances by providing some ceremony of belonging to some sort of crisis response without actually addressing the material and ethical foundations of a long-term sustainability. It has to cease. I'm sorry, the actors have been fired. They don't have what they need to deliver. If we have what we need to deliver, let's start delivering. I got what I've got. I look forward to talking with you, so good luck for the rest of the day, and I hope that you're able to deliver on this before 6:30 p.m. today, because if not, and tomorrow is going to be a very different day, and it's going to be a different day anyway, but I'm really hoping that we can move forward with a solid foundation, because the next couple of stages we're going to have to undertake are going to be ones that are going to call up a little more of our resolve in a different manner. So let's take care of this today. Thank you.